The boardroom on the 47th floor of Meridian Industries didn't just overlook the city, it loomed over it. With floor-to-ceiling glass walls. The 12 executives sitting around the polished mahogany table didn't feel like they were part of the bustling metropolis below. They felt like they owned it, and in many ways they did. The air inside was cool, recycled, and smelled faintly of expensive coffee and leather. At the head of the table sat Vivian Cross. At 32, she was a billionaire, a titan of industry who had built this empire from a garage startup into a Fortune 500 giant. Her eyes were fixed on the quarterly projections projected on the far wall, her mind already 3 steps ahead of the numbers. And then, a chair scraped against the floor. It came from the back of the room, near the door. It was a sound so out of place in the rhythmic hum of the meeting that heads turned in irritation. Ethan Cole stood up. Most of the people in the room had never bothered to learn his name. To them, he was part of the furniture. A senior systems analyst from the infrastructure division, the kind of guy you walked past 1,000 times without ever truly seeing. He was 44, with brown hair turning gray at the temples, wearing a suit that was aggressively average. He walked to the table, placed a simple manila folder on the polished wood, and said 5 words that stopped time. "I'm the new owner." Vivian Cross looked at him. For a second, there was silence. Then, she laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh initially. It was the genuine, surprised laugh you give when someone tells a joke that catches you completely off guard. She waited for the punchline. She waited for someone to explain this bizarre interruption. But Ethan didn't smile. He didn't sweat. He simply stood there with an expression that was calm, almost apologetic. In the back of his mind, Ethan wasn't thinking about the billions of dollars represented in this room. He was hearing his daughter's voice from that morning. "Text me when you're done, Dad." Ethan Cole had worked at Meridian for 11 years. He arrived every morning at 7:45 a.m., parked in the same spot on the 3rd level, and took the service elevator to avoid the crowds. He liked being invisible. Invisibility was comfortable, like an old coat that fit just right. He wore the same rotation of 3 suits, all purchased from the same department store, all in shades of gray or navy that deflected attention. He had learned long ago that corporations rewarded visibility, loud voices, and sharp elbows. He had chosen to opt out of that game. His colleagues respected his work without respecting him. They forwarded him problems they couldn't solve and expected solutions by morning. He delivered, consistently, without complaint. No one invited him to drinks. No one asked about his weekend. He existed in a professional limbo where competence was acknowledged, but never celebrated, and none of them knew why. Every evening, Ethan left the office at exactly 5:15 p.m. Not a minute later, he drove to Westbrook Elementary School where his daughter, Lily, waited on the front steps. She was 10 years old, with her mother's eyes and her father's quiet disposition. 3 years ago, Lily's mother had lost an 18-month battle with cancer. On the day of the funeral, standing in the rain, Ethan had made a promise to himself. He promised that Lily would never feel abandoned. That promise shaped every single decision he made. Their evenings were sacred. Homework at the kitchen table. Dinner with no screens. Reading time on the couch, the smell of her strawberry shampoo mixing with the scent of old paperbacks. These hours were not negotiable. They were the architecture of a life rebuilt from grief. Vivian Cross, however, operated in a different universe. She had founded Meridian at 23. By 28, she had taken it public. By 30, she was the youngest female billionaire in tech. She was beautiful in a sharp, deliberate way. Dark hair pulled back, tailored suits that cost more than a car, and eyes that could make a seasoned executive stammer. In her world, sentiment was a weakness. Results were everything. She had sacrificed relationships, friendships, and any semblance of a normal life to build this. She didn't regret it. She didn't have time for regret. Ethan and Vivian had crossed paths perhaps a dozen times in 11 years. Always in passing. She never recognized him. They existed in the same physical space but inhabited different realities. Until today. The laughter that Vivian started rippled around the table. Gerald Morrison, the chief financial officer, leaned back in his leather chair with a smirk. He'd seen every corporate stunt imaginable, and he found this one particularly pathetic. Sandra Chen, the head of legal, was already reaching for her phone to call security. Vivian let the laughter run its course before raising a hand. "I appreciate the entertainment," she said, her voice carrying that effortless authority she was famous for. "But we have actual business to discuss. Perhaps security can escort our friend back to wherever he came from." Ethan didn't move. He didn't argue. He just waited. There was something unnerving about his stillness. "Do you even know who I am?" Gerald asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "I've been on this board for 15 years. Whatever paperwork you fabricated, it won't survive 5 minutes of scrutiny." Ethan met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not asking you to believe me," he said softly. "I'm asking you to read." The folder sat untouched in the center of the table. A mundane object suddenly charged with inexplicable tension. The laughter faded into an uncomfortable silence. Vivian's smile remained fixed, but her eyes shifted. She was calculating. Marcus Webb, a junior attorney sitting in as an observer, was the first to break the paralysis. He was 29, ambitious and eager to prove himself. He reached across the table, pulled the folder toward him, and opened it with the casual confidence of someone expecting to expose a fraud. He read the first page. A cover letter. He flipped to the second page. A corporate charter dated 14 years ago. Then he reached the third page, and Marcus stopped breathing. "Ms. Cross," Marcus said quietly. His voice was stripped of all its earlier arrogance. "I think you need to see this." Vivian's smile finally disappeared. She held out her hand. Marcus passed the folder to her with the careful reverence of someone handling a live grenade. She began reading. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally, to something that looked like fear. Ethan glanced at his watch. The meeting had run longer than he expected. Lily had an art project due tomorrow, a painted backdrop, and he needed to pick up more blue acrylic paint on the way home. The silence in the room became suffocating. Every executive sat frozen, watching Vivian read, waiting for her to declare the documents fake, to scream, to do something to restore the universe to its proper axis. She turned the pages slowly, her jaw tightening with each new paragraph. "Where did you get this?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I've always had it," Ethan replied. "I just never had a reason to use it." What those documents revealed was a story buried under 14 years of explosive growth and deliberate forgetting. In the earliest days of Meridian, before the investors, before the fame, Vivian Cross had faced a crisis that nearly destroyed the company before it began. A former partner had attempted a hostile takeover through fraudulent contracts. It would have bankrupted her. She had been 23, brilliant but inexperienced. Watching her dream collapse. Desperate, she reached out to a mutual acquaintance who connected her with an independent consultant specializing in corporate security systems. That consultant was Ethan Cole. For 6 weeks, Ethan had worked around the clock. He dismantled the fraudulent infrastructure piece by piece. He documented every irregularity. He built the case that saved the company. He did it without fanfare, driven by the intellectual challenge and a quiet belief that Vivian's vision deserved a chance. When it was over, Vivian was so grateful, so convinced she owed him everything, that she insisted on compensation beyond his fee. Ethan refused cash. He refused stock options. Instead, he asked for a contingent ownership clause, a clause buried deep in the founding documents, activated only under specific conditions. A poison pill. Against corruption. Vivian agreed because the company was worth nothing then. She agreed because Ethan had saved her. She agreed because she never imagined Meridian would become a global empire, or that Ethan would quietly join the company years later, content to work in obscurity, while the clause sat dormant in files no one ever reviewed. The specific conditions. Ethan explained to the stunned room, involved a series of triggers related to corporate governance violations. Over the past 3 years, as Meridian grew faster than its internal controls could manage, those triggers were tripped, one by one. The clause activated automatically 6 months ago. I've spent the last half year having it verified by 3 independent legal firms. This is impossible. Gerald stammered, his voice cracking. We would have found this. Our lawyers. The clause was designed to be overlooked, Ethan said calmly. That was the point. I helped design your document management system when I joined the company. I knew exactly where something like this would disappear. Vivian looked up from the papers. For the first time in years, she faced a situation where her money, her connections, and her intimidation tactics were useless. The legal foundation of her own company had just betrayed her. What do you want? She asked. The question hung in the air. Every executive leaned forward. They expected demands for millions. They expected a power grab. They expected revenge for being ignored for 11 years. I want to go home, Ethan said. I have dinner to make. No one laughed this time. The answer was too strange. You have controlling interest in a $47 billion company. Sandra Chen said slowly, as if speaking to a child. And you want to go home and make dinner? Ethan nodded. My daughter is expecting me. Vivian studied him with the intensity of a predator. She was looking for the angle, the lie. But she found only a tired man who seemed more concerned about rush hour traffic than the empire he had just claimed. You've known for 6 months, Vivian said. You could have destroyed everything I've built. Why walk into a meeting like this? Why tell us? Because destroying things was never the point. Ethan replied, I didn't activate this clause. The company's own problems did. I'm just the person who noticed. Why need to talk? Vivian said, privately. The conference room on the 45th floor was small, designed for sensitive negotiations. Vivian dismissed her assistant and closed the door. She sat across from Ethan. No lawyers. No witnesses. Just tell me what this is really about. Ethan settled into his chair. You want a motive that makes sense to you. Something you can negotiate against. I'm sorry to disappoint you. 14 years ago, I helped you because the problem was interesting. You insisted on the clause. I accepted it because refusing would have hurt your pride. Then why now? Vivian pressed. Because the company is breaking, Ethan said. The governance problems that triggered the clause aren't abstract. They are symptoms of a culture that stopped paying attention to what matters. I've watched it from the inside. Good people leaving because they aren't valued. Bad decisions made because no one feels safe disagreeing with leadership. The same problems that almost destroyed you in the beginning are growing back, just wearing nicer suits. Vivian wanted to defend herself. But Ethan wasn't attacking. He was just describing what he saw. You could have sent a memo, she said, her voice softer now. I sent 12, over 3 years. They disappeared into the same system I designed. The admission struck Vivian harder than she expected. She thought of the filtered summaries her assistants prepared for her. The isolation of the corner office. My wife was diagnosed 4 years ago, Ethan continued. Cancer, aggressive. She fought for 18 months. During that time, I learned something important. There is no amount of money or power that matters when you're holding someone's hand in a hospital room at 300 a.m. I stayed at this company because the work was stable. I needed to be present for my daughter. I needed to be home for dinner. That is my priority. It still is. Vivian was quiet. She had heard stories of employees with personal tragedies. But she had always processed them as data points. Variables to be managed. What do you want me to do? She asked. And for once, the question was genuine. What you should have been doing all along, Ethan said. Listen. Fix the systems that reward loyalty with invisibility. Build something that doesn't require fear to function. As for the ownership, we can structure something. I don't want to run a company. I want to pick my daughter up from school. I want to help her with her homework. I want to read books on the couch until she falls asleep. That is my life. I am not trading it. You could sell your stake, Vivian said. The numbers would be life-changing. Generational wealth. Ethan smiled sadly. My daughter has a home. She has a father who shows up. She has a school she loves. What would I buy with billions that would improve any of that? It was such a simple question, and Vivian realized she had no answer. The days following the boardroom revelation moved with unusual speed. Vivian called an emergency session with the full board and presented the situation with shocking transparency. Gerald Morrison pushed for war. We fight this! We challenge the validity! We destroy him! Vivian listened to him, and for the first time, she found his arguments hollow. Gerald wanted to protect his power. That was it. We are not going to challenge him, Vivian announced, cutting him off. We are going to listen. The boardroom fell silent. The governance issues are real, she continued. I've reviewed the reports that were buried. We built a machine that is very good at making money, and very bad at hearing anything it doesn't want to hear. That ends now. Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily. Pizza or tacos for dinner? He smiled and typed back, your choice. Home in 20. The restructuring happened in increments. Vivian established new channels for feedback. She created an ethics board with teeth. She started holding town halls where she answered real questions. Ethan declined every offer to join the leadership team. His only stipulation was that he be allowed to continue leaving at 5:15 p.m. Vivian began to envy him. Their private conversations became regular. She asked for his perspective not because he owned the company, but because he saw things she didn't. How do you know when you're making the right choice? She asked him once, looking out at the city lights. You don't, Ethan said. You make the choice you can live with, and then you live with it. The rest is just hoping. 3 months later, the formal restructuring was finalized. Ethan transferred operational control back to the leadership through a trust, retaining a stake but ensuring employee protections were locked into the bylaws. The board meeting announcing this was his last appearance in the executive suite. He signed the documents, shook hands with the people who once dismissed him, and walked to the elevator. Vivian caught up with him before the doors closed. I never thanked you, she said, not just for back then, but for now, for giving me a chance to see what I'd become. Ethan smiled. You did the hard part. Changing is what matters. Will you stay for the reception? She asked. The board wants to acknowledge you. I appreciate it. But I have somewhere to be. Vivian nodded. The dinner that matters. The dinner that matters? He confirmed. The elevator doors opened. Ethan stepped out into the lobby, past the security guards who finally knew his name, and walked out into the cool evening air. He drove home. The traffic was light. He pulled into his driveway just as the streetlights flickered on. Lily met him at the door with her backpack and a smile that made every compromise he had ever made worthwhile. You're home, she said. I'm home. They made pasta with red sauce. They worked on her volcano model for science class, mixing baking soda and papier-mâché. They read a book about a secret garden until her eyes grew heavy. Ethan carried her to bed, arranged her stuffed animals just so, and kissed her forehead in the dark. Dad, she murmured, half asleep. Was your meeting important today? He thought about the boardroom, the billions, the look on Vivian Cross's face when the ground shifted beneath her. Not as important as this, he whispered. Vivian stayed late at the office that night. But instead of working, she stood at the window, looking out at the millions of lights below. Families having dinner. Parents helping with homework. People choosing small, quiet moments. She realized she would never be Ethan Cole. She had made different choices, but she could be better. She could listen more. She could remember that the people who worked for her were people, not resources. In his small house in the suburbs, Ethan Cole washed the dishes. He sat in the armchair that was too big for one person, the one he kept because getting rid of it felt like erasing the memory of his wife. He was content. He had never wanted to own a company. He wanted to be present. He wanted to be a father. Tomorrow he would go back to his desk. He would solve problems no one would thank him for. He would leave at 5 and 15, and he would choose this life again, and again, and again. Because some victories don't require an audience. Some power doesn't need to be used. And sometimes, the most successful man in the room is the one who knows exactly when to leave it.